Hi, and welcome to another foundational concept brief talk. This talk is on shame, which is obviously a huge subject. But there's a couple things I wanted to touch upon briefly, uh, and it ties into some of the other talks, the foundational talks, like on primary and secondary pain, the authentic and the false self, and habitual patterns. The reason I say that is that when we're talking about the authentic self and the inauthentic self, and we're talking about habitual patterns, those are all the domain of the false self, and the false self is the only place where shame exists. Shame does not exist in the authentic self. The difference is being when somebody is responding to something out of shame, the immediate response is to try to hide the error because they feel it's an offense of character, that they don't want someone to think ill of them, and their very character or their very being is in question. And so some of the most common responses is not talk about it. Like in family, something shameful happens. And the family said, don't talk about it. Don't tell anybody. We can't tell anybody about this. That's all shame-based responding, which is the domain of the false self, because false self is based on what we think other people think of us. So if something's happened in the family that we think would lower our value in the standing of the community, we don't talk about it. We hide it. If if we're not, if we are in our authentic self and something happens, we go, oh boy, I really made a mistake. That was terrible. Let me see what I can do to fix this. I'll tell one story that I've talked about before in some of my talks, but when I.M. Pei, the world famous architect, was just starting out, his first building was an office building. And after he got it built, the storm came up and started pulling the windows out of the building. Not good, particularly for a first-time architect, his first building. So what he did was he said, my fault. I took a look at it, and I submitted the wrong specs. It's my fault, and I'll replace every single window at my own cost. He had to borrow the money to do it, but he did that. And so what did that do for his standing in the architectural community? All of a sudden, here's this man, new architect on the scene, and willing to be accountable and take this huge debt upon himself to fix this mistake. That's a man of integrity. And so it becomes very different. It's a very different circumstance when we're responding with a sense of the true self. We have an intrinsic sense of self-worth, and we stand in to be accountable for our actions. With shame-based responding, we make excuses. We blame the circumstances. Well, I got and so-and-so came over and and I was supposed to get this when they weren't there. And the stories go on and on and on. And no one is willing to be accountable. Oh, it's so-and-so's fault. Yeah, they just, whatever. I called them, but they didn't answer. So I don't know. I went ahead so shame. I'm mentioning shame, talking about shame right now in this talk relative to mental and emotional well-being, because when we're in a state of shame, it's our very character and our very sense of being that's in question. And when we're in the sense of in our authentic self, it's our actions that are in question. And did we or did we not behave in line with our core values. And if we did not act in line with our core values, then we fix it. Two very different responses to life. And most of our really deep concerns are all in the false self, and they're all has to do with our sense of character and shame-based responding. And without going into, we get this sense of shame from our family and from our culture, and it's just, it's a widespread phenomenon. So, but the reason I mention it here is simply to be aware of it and how it relates to the authentic self and to primary and secondary pain and habitual patterns and those sorts of things, so that the more we can identify, like if you're in a situation and you're having a strong response to something, if you realize in the middle of it that it's a shame-based response, you can shift out of that and into the authentic self and come up with a completely different strategy, one of accountability and fixing the situation rather than letting it kind of swallow you up. So thank you for listening. I hope that was helpful. And again, this is just a very brief introduction to a very large topic. So thanks for listening.